Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to you all, wherever you are in our wide world. Welcome to another NetHope webinar. My name is Seth Otto, and I'm the Digital Communications Manager here at NetHope and producer of the NetHope webinar series. We are delighted to be joined today by representatives from Plan International, Catholic Relief Services, PATH, and Vera Solutions. And they will be presenting on digitizing management of indicators and results frameworks, lessons learned. Let's go over a bit of housekeeping before we get started. First off, let's make this webinar interactive. Let us know what comes up for you. Please post your comments and questions in the chat window. The presenters will address them this hour at the appropriate times. After the webinar, please pay attention to your inbox for a follow-up email that we will send your way soon. The email will include links to the webinar recording, the slides, and any of the resources shared during today's presentation and discussion. And we really appreciate your feedback. Your opinion matters to us, and we use your responses to our survey to improve this webinar series for you and our broader NetHope community. It also provides our presenters with an opportunity to connect with you directly if you want them to. We'll be posting links to the survey towards the end of the webinar. All that out of our way, I'd like to present today's speakers, three of whom are joining us today from NetHope member organizations. Emma Newbat is a monitoring and evaluation specialist at Plan International. Heather Dolphin is the Deputy Director for Monitoring, Evaluation, Accountability, and Learning at Catholic Relief Services. Julie Rajaratnam is the Director of Strategy, Measurement, and Learning at PATH. Apologies, Julie. And we are joined today by Zach Kaufman, who is the co-founder and CEO of Vera Solutions. Welcome, everyone. I'll hand control of this webinar over to Zach. Take it away, Zach.
All right. Thanks, Seth. And I think I can start sharing when you stop sharing, maybe. Great to be here, and a big thanks to NetHope for organizing this. It's great to see such a big turnout. I think we've got folks calling in from all over the globe, which is really wonderful to see. Hopefully folks can see my screen. I'll set that to share. As Seth mentioned, my name is Zach Kaufman. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Vera Solutions. What my title doesn't say is that my background is in monitoring and evaluation and epidemiology and research. So this is a topic that's near and dear to me, and I'm really excited to be joined by colleagues from CRS and PATH and Plan today for this what I'm sure will be a really rich discussion. I'll give just a couple minutes of preamble and some context. And then we'll dive on into the discussion with Heather, Emma, and Julie. All right. So quickly, Vera Solutions. So we're really focused on amplifying the impact of the social sector with technology, and a lot of our work is really in the monitoring and evaluation, program management, project management space. So we're really working with organizations to help them strengthen how they work, how they deliver their programs, and how they track their impact. We've worked with over 400 organizations since we got started. And we're working with many of you around the globe as well that are calling in today, which is great to see. Over the years, we really saw a lot of common needs and patterns in the work that we were doing. And some of you may know we leverage the Salesforce platform in much of the work that we do. And we found that the platform was actually surprisingly, I think to many, really well suited to indicator management and management of results frameworks. So basically, bringing monitoring evaluation off of spreadsheets or off of heavily customized bespoke solutions and onto the same platform that many organizations use for CRM or fundraising or for other purposes. But there was kind of a missing layer of functionality. And so we set out to build AMP Impact and launched it on the Salesforce App Exchange back in 2017. The reason I bring this up is we'll hear a little bit more about AMP Impact in the discussion today as CRS, Plan, and PATH are all using AMP Impact. I'm going to just give a little bit of context. I'm not going to dive into detail to what AMP Impact is or how it works. Basically, it's the intersection of managing a portfolio of programs, projects, and grants on the left side, including work planning, financials, risks, et cetera, and then impact measurement on the right side with frameworks, indicators, targets, results. These are bolded because that's really where the bulk of our focus is going to be on the discussion, but we may veer into some other adjacent areas as well. So that's what AMP Impact is, and happy to chat more about it if folks want to hear more from me about it. The last bit I'll say from my side is that Good monitoring evaluation is not all about technology, right? Technology is one piece of the puzzle. We wrote up a blog a couple of years ago on the 4 pillars of good M&E, and worth checking that out. But it really revolves around having a sound strategy, asking the right questions in the first place, having a strong framework or set of frameworks in place for your organization and your programs, and defining the right indicators that matter. Then building out suitable methods for data collection and using them consistently. And then comes the systems piece. And we'll spend a fair amount of time, I think, today talking about systems. Lastly is the piece around capacity, and I think often overlooked part of what really drives good M&E for organizations around the globe. So I think we'll touch on each of these a little bit today, but I want to kind of just set the stage that, technology is not the be all and end all, when we're trying to change the way that we work as organizations, or, or change the way we're managing our indicators, or managing our frameworks, but it can be a really powerful catalyst. And I'm really excited from there to dig into the conversation with the rest of the group. So we've got Heather, Emma, and Julie, and I'll kick it over to each of them for a quick introduction. So what would be great to hear from each of you is about your role in your organization. And if you can also share a little bit of context about what your organization has been doing as far as digitizing indicator management and results framework, where you're at on that journey. And we've got Heather first on the slide here. So maybe Heather, I'll kick it over to you first if you're up for it.
Sure. Thanks, Zach, and greetings, everyone. So CRS has been using AMP Impact as part of our strategy measurement. And so unlike PATH on this call, you'll hear about their approach. CRS's approach is specific to measuring only about 25 selected indicators that represent, or that were identified within the agency to identify our individual capacity in the areas where we work. So, so we've been using AMP Impact as part of our Salesforce suite, and have gradually identified how to take advantage of its modular interoperability with the multiple systems and platforms that we use here in the agency, so that we can pull existing data from our finance systems and pull that into AMP Impact, as well as using complementary tools to help us facilitate some of the complex calculations that we need for those indicators, and then the visualizations. So it's benefiting from the modular technology that AMP Impact allows us to capitalize on.
That's great. Thanks, Heather. So a couple interesting themes there. One is kind of standardization of a small number of indicators and trying to use those consistently, and then also connection into some other systems that the organization's using. Great. Let's move over to Emma. Can you give us a quick intro, Emma?
Yeah, sure. Happy to do so. Great to be here with you, everyone. My name's Emma, and I am a monitoring evaluation specialist at Plan. I sit in our MEL department at Global Hub, which is our international headquarters. From our side as Plan, how we're currently using Impact it's this sort of the start of a journey for us. So what's live and in use at the moment is the monitoring and evaluation functionality of our online system. So country offices set up their projects and their country strategy, log frames within the system, and then report data against indicators. Very much aligned to the design of their project or program. So that uses a set of global indicators, but it might also use and involve project-specific indicators. And this area of work started a few years ago for us. So very much as part of a broader focus around strengthening the generation and use of evidence within Plan, which was stimulated really from both the strategic level in terms of this push for greater accountability and digitalization, but also from our country offices, who were really crying out for and demanding a better system for managing data and managing indicators. So M&E functionality is live right now. The direction we're moving in is kind of very related to what Heather was talking about. So integrating project management functionality within the system, and then longer term in terms of integration with our financial system and access to kind of holistic reports on performance.
Awesome. Thanks, Emma. So interesting theme there, a little bit different from CRS, having kind of project specific indicators in addition to global indicators, and also hearing a little bit about kind of that need and demand from country offices. So it'll be good to pick up on how you guys have kind of worked with that. Julie, let's hear from you.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. So happy to have this webinar, and I love sharing lessons learned. It's one of my favorites. I am the Director of Strategy, Measurement, and Learning at PATH. And at PATH, we embarked on this effort to centralize our results reporting into AMP Impact. We launched in April of last year. So that was 2022. And I would say very much we are on a journey, as Emma described. We started with a pretty limited functionality in terms of what AMP Impact offers, because we knew this was a first step into this type of routine reporting for projects. We didn't want to overwhelm our project teams, so we wanted to kind of introduce this gradually and start building on it. And we took the bottom-up approach. So our focus in the initial year was we had some standard attributes that we decided to collect about all of our projects. But in terms of indicators, we asked them to input the indicators they were measuring themselves. So that is a wide variety of indicators. And that helped us get better visibility as to the measurement that's happening across the organization. For an organization that has a wide variety of work. We don't have a standard, we don't work in one health area, we don't have a single type of project, they vary quite substantially. So that was year one, and now where we're moving towards is we've developed a menu of indicators that we're going to build into the system, which are more standardized, like Heather mentioned, CRS's core indicators. And we're going to see what the uptake is in terms of how our projects are able to measure each of those menu of indicators. There's about 12 to 14. And each of those then has, there's going to be a lot of detail, because each of those indicators, of course, has components to it that break down and get disaggregated. So it'll be a next phase in the journey, but an important one to kind of build towards that centralized standardization.
Great. So a bit of diversity across the three organizations in terms of where the baseline was at in terms of the strategy. Really interesting to hear about PATH's bottom up approach, and kind of seeing first, kind of taking stock of what all is being measured, and then trying to grow from there into that menu, as you said. So I want to kind of double click on the last piece you mentioned is around kind of getting to that central solution. Let's talk a little bit about the why of digitizing indicator management and results frameworks. Why move? Well, tell us maybe a little bit about kind of where your organization has been, or where you've come from pre AMP Impact, and why. What are the benefits, do you think, for your organization? Either ones you've seen already, or ones that you're working towards. Maybe we can take it around. And Julie, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah. So why did we do this? Well, our effort at institutional measurement used to be an annual survey. And it was run by my team. It was, we did it in February, March for the prior year, and then cleaned the data. And by the time that was all done, we're looking at May or June of releasing those results, and they're already dated. So So one thing we really wanted to have as part of this effort is more timely information. That was a big motivator. And I think in terms of part of incorporating the system gives us the ability to move away from that annual push and organize that data collection and reporting effort around the life of the project itself. We are a project run organization. That's how we do business. So project teams are much more apt to spend the time needed entering quality information about what they're doing if they're doing it at the time that makes sense for the project. And so we're now collecting this information based on the project life cycle. So within 90 days, the project has to set themselves up in AMP Impact, establish the indicators they're going to be measuring, the results they're reporting against. And then we have kind of an every 6 month clock that reminds people to go back in and update their record. So I anticipate, and that shift to the project lifecycle has just happened with this most recent deployment of configuration updates. So we're just making that transition into the reporting process. But my anticipation is we're going to get much better data quality because of doing that. And it also spreads the labor of managing this process from a really intensive period of time where I need a team almost primarily focused on supporting projects to get all of their data in, which is huge. And it means we have to drop a lot of other things in order to focus on this. We're now going to be able to spread that management over the course of the year and help project teams get their information in throughout the course and in a much more even way. So I think that's going to help projects. It will help my team just with the logistics of managing this work.
That's great. It makes a lot of sense, and it may not seem obvious, right, as a why or as a benefit when you think about the timeliness aspect of this. But if you can spread that work out and from the HQ point of view, but then also make it more practical as far as when the work is happening at the country level, the local level. I can see how that could be quite helpful. Emma, let's hear from you. Tell us a little bit about the why for plan and some of the benefits.
Yeah, and actually some of the things very much pick up on points that Julie's raised as well. I think as planned, we started from a position a few years ago where access to data was just in general very fragmented across different teams and different parts of the organization. So that meant a lot of inefficiency in terms of parallel requests for information, that kind of, one-off annual reporting that Julie's alluded to as well, and overall kind of a lack of shared visibility on data. And at different levels, so both globally, but also regionally, we were really limited in our ability to aggregate data at outcome level just because of that fragmentation, really. So the benefits that we're starting to see and which will increase over time, I think very much speak to both of those challenges. So shared access to information is a big one for us. Our M&E system and the data within it is open access to anyone that's been trained and provisioned. So management teams are able to log in at any time to see what data is available within their office or for the projects that they're managing. Different team members, so for example, M&E managers or regional teams that are supporting particular projects or offices can again log in and access data in real time instead of sending separate requests and things like that. And so all of this, I think, is really helpful for efficiency and for collaboration, but also so making better use of the data. I think we're at quite an early stage on this, but we know that we'll see this over time, is that ability to be able to aggregate data, particularly at the outcome level across our different projects, programs, geographies, operating contexts. And I mentioned we do have a set of global indicators, and that's very much part of this holistic approach to moving forward, alongside those kind of project specific indicators that are being used within projects or within offices. I would say a kind of secondary benefit, which we are seeing as well, is that the kind of online system and the open access is giving us a bit more visibility on where there are still maybe data quality challenges or issues in terms of M&E processes or data, all of which I think is actually quite helpful in terms of where support might need to be a bit more targeted or where kind of further work is needed. So those are some of the kind of benefits that I would call out from the plan side.
Thanks, Emma. A lot of that resonates a lot. I mean, before we set up Vera, I oversaw M&E at a smaller NGO. We were maybe 5 to 10 million a year, and working across a dozen or so countries. So smaller tasks than what you all have on your plates. But we kind of went from this just like one-way flow of data with no feedback loops, and nobody had access. Nobody had access to the data as it got digitized and kind of went up the pyramid. And replace that with a system where everybody had access on Salesforce. Everybody had access to the data that was relevant to them, and you could kind of see how other countries were doing. You could see how other sites were doing. That became motivating and also just helpful to know, hey, that data's there when I need it. So that's really cool to hear. Heather, tell us about CRS.
Okay, so CRS had a different objective, and it was really prompted by a board request to know what we were doing and how we can promote the work that CRS does externally. So it started as a way to be like capacity statement tool, a tool that would kind of demonstrate our capacities. But it was put in place at the time of when our strategic plan started, and we use those indicators as basically proxies for our strategic measurement and how well are we meeting the objectives of our strategic plan when it comes to transformational change at scale across these different outcome areas. So it's definitely been serving that purpose. But you had asked, Zach, like where we started, and we started using our IPTT sheets across projects to manually look at, trying to aggregate those results across projects within regions. And I saw David Lee is on the call. He was at CRS at the time, and he can attest to how painful that process was. And that was before we started, the search for a platform that would help us, automatically aggregate our results. And we had to be really thoughtful about, which are the indicators that can be aggregated and still be meaningful. So there was a lot of thought put into the selection of those indicators so that they really could speak to both our strategic plan and our progress over time. And as a result, I think an unexpected result is that we're seeing our progress. We're seeing where we're surpassing targets during our strategic period, and areas where we may need to adjust the targets because they might be lower than expected. But we also, as more teams can see their contributions to the data or to the aggregation, that creates this virtual cycle of demand for data. And so we've been able to see how, as we make that transparent, that more and more people or more projects want to make sure that their results are incorporated into our agency results. And there's a lot of incentive within the structures of the agency to help support teams and make sure that their results are taken into account. And another kind of surprising, it shouldn't be surprising, but an unexpected, something we didn't plan for, was just the sense of gratification that everyone from the field at all levels of the field can see their contributions to the strategic and how important that is and how motivating that is for our staff and for executives also to see everybody's effort and to just be so grateful for the work that everybody does, because it all becomes very visible. And so it's very, very motivating.
Yeah, it's a super important point, right? I mean, I think we all want to see the product of all the hard work we do as human beings, right? And you know, a lot of us get into this work, right, because we want to see what, you know, we want to make a difference and see the difference that we're making. So that definitely makes a lot of sense. And also jives. I mean, what I've seen with system adoption, you know, over the years is it really comes down to two things. It comes down to it comes down to the like how much you're asking of people. So how big is the ask? How much work is involved? What's the perceived effort? And then it comes down to what's the perceived value, right? And you hit on there, Heather, the, you know, incentive, kind of just the seeing that contribution into the global totals as being a bit of a, again, maybe that's not what you think of when you think of value or you think of incentive, but seeing that contribution can be really motivating for folks. So I hear you on that. We're getting a lot of really great questions and some nice targeted questions in the chat. And so feel free, speakers, feel free to kind of pick up on any of those if you want to incorporate into answers, and I'll try to sweep back and make sure we get through as many as possible toward the end. The next question we want to talk a little bit just about, we kind of covered the why and the benefits. We want to talk a bit about the how. So, you know, what are the key ingredients needed at an organization that is kind of setting out on a journey to digitize its indicator management, its management of results frameworks? What does it take to get there? What would you advise for other organizations? Maybe let's come back to Julie.
Yeah, thanks. I think what you just mentioned, Zach, is what we need to do when we're thinking about a project like this, is really think about what is the perceived level of effort and what is the perceived gain, and minimize the former and maximize the latter as much as you can. One of the things that will help with maximizing the latter is, as you're planning, designing your system, and then before you're rolling it out, what can you design as far as data visualization or reporting or feedback loops, so that when that system gets launched, people are getting a response from what they're putting in, or they're able to see the needle move because they've just submitted their data. When you have those when those exist at the time of launch, then it's a lot more motivating, to Heather's point, because people can actually see the difference that they're making when they're putting their data in the system. So thinking, and that's something I would say that we missed so this is my lesson learned. We launched our system. We were on a tight timeline to collect data in time for, you know, reporting to the board. And so we collected the data, then we built the visualizations, and those rolled out, you know, weeks, months after people were actually in the system. And so I think we lost that opportunity to just demonstrate the immediate benefit. So yeah, I just emphasize that as a really key part. And then minimizing the perceived entry. So, you know, we first looked at AMP Impact's full out of the box product. It was clearly going to be too much for our teams that haven't done this before. So many of them haven't even interacted in Salesforce at all. Like, Salesforce is a whole new platform for them. And so we turned off a lot of the basic functionality just to kind of get people focused on where we really needed them to spend their time. And so I think that was a good move for us, because if they had seen, even if we had pointed them to, hey, you only have to do this part, when people see the whole infrastructure, they want to make use of it. And so that would have been probably overwhelming. And I don't know that we would have gotten the data that we really needed. So those are two, I think, key lessons learned in terms of driving adoption.
Yeah, those are great insights. I think that I'll echo the second one around just keeping it simple at the start to the extent that you can, right? It's complex enough to learn a new tool and and bring a new process into the cloud if it doesn't exist, isn't already happening there. And I think we've seen that with lots of organizations that have been successful are trying to kind of keep to an MVP mindset, keep to kind of lean approach, a lean mindset at the start. And then the other point around feedback loops, thinking about feedback loops early and often, right? There's a little bit of a chicken and egg challenge there, because if the data is there, we're not visualizing anything, right? So it's a little bit hard. It can be hard to imagine what the visualization needs to be necessarily, but making sure that that's in there from the start so people can see that value. Definitely great thoughts. Emma, tell us about the how and plan.
Yeah, sure. I'll pick up on a couple of things that I think we did do and which I would really recommend to others. And then one thing that I look back and think this is an area that we could have improved, which I hope is useful. I think one thing we recognized as plan and was part of the how is that obviously the system isn't a solution to everything. It's a tool that reflects offline processes. So for plan, the kind of introduction of the system was very much part of a broader focus on strengthening our monitoring and evaluation across the organization. So for example, it was associated with a kind of heavy investment in training and things like that perhaps hadn't been there before. And we also put in place kind of some quite close hands-on technical support for offices that were starting to use the system through our regional monitoring and evaluation specialists who work very closely with offices, because as Julie also alluded to, Salesforce was completely new to almost everyone. So there was that kind of the value and the need of having someone to help with troubleshooting, quality assurance, and really trying to support getting the system into use. So those are the kind of two things that I think we did do and I'd recommend to others. I think picking up on Julie's point around the visualization, we obviously, as organizations do, went through a pilot process. I think we needed or should have done or had a stronger focus on the end result through the pilot, so the reports and dashboards. I think it can be tempting in a time bound or kind of time pressure to focus on what goes in. I fully support that focus on what comes out right from the beginning in terms of design, piloting, and everything.
That's great. Thanks, Emma. And I think you're touching a little bit. There's a question from Alex earlier around, what if an organization isn't using Salesforce, isn't using Salesforce at all, right? And for you guys, this was really AMP and this M&E or PMERL, right? As it's called, was kind of the first introduction of Salesforce at Plan. Is that right?
I think a few offices were using it in different kind of capacities or with their own systems, but globally for many people, including myself, it was a new one. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's something we've seen as well, right? That again, folks don't necessarily think about Salesforce as the obvious platform for program management and impact measurement, but a lot of what makes it so powerful for CRM and fundraising also makes it really powerful for project management, program management, impact measurement. Even if you get down to to tracking participants and service delivery, it could be really powerful for that as well. But there's by no means do you need to already be using Salesforce to be exploring Salesforce in this regard. I think probably about half of the organizations we've worked with over the years, AMP and M&E and program management was like the start of their journey, and then maybe they explored kind of other ways they might use the platform beyond that. Cool. Sorry, Heather, I'm taking your thunder. Go for it. As an organization that's been using Salesforce quite a bit for other purposes, right?
Okay. So yeah, how we got started. I see some questions. Yeah, the change management focus of it. So I've already talked about how having these results is a response to a request from the board. So having executive endorsement and having it be part of our strategic plan were important drivers. I know I mentioned that earlier, but just to say that in terms of the how, that really helped ensure that the change management happened because it was really sanctioned from the top. And the other ways that I think are important is to really focus on our existing structures. and working within those who have the greatest influence in like our region, within our regional structures, really getting a lot of support and feedback from our regional deputy regional directors for program quality, and they really helped us make sure that our rollout was really effective in their regions. And the other thing I think is really important is the ownership component. I saw somebody had a question about you know, whether it's top down, and the way that CRS organized it was really to have it be sector specific. And so it's those sectors that are deciding among themselves which indicators they think speaks best, or it can be most meaningful when aggregated to be able to represent our capacity in those sectors. So it was a real conversation that happened. And so as a result, those sectors are the owners of those indicators. It's not the meal unit that owns those indicators, it's those sectors. And there are people who are identified as the owners of those indicators so that when we get the data, they're the ones that are responsible for reviewing, asking any questions of those who submitted the data to make sure that it's quality and it's clear. Another important component, I think others have already mentioned the visualizations, how that drives demand. So just let me mention two more really quick ones, is having a one-stop shop portal where everyone can go to just get everything that they need, depending on what their role is in the process. They can find information by role, they can find information by indicator, but it's one location and it's just clear so that people can get all their questions answered. And then we have an amazing team who provide one-on-one support to anyone who has questions. So to just make sure that users, there's just as much user support as possible to help make that an easy lift for everybody. Over.
Awesome, thanks. Yeah, that last point, I think remembering that the work doesn't stop when the system gets launched, right? There's a whole new, there's layers of work then of just supporting users and answering questions and making sure that people are really using the tool as it gets rolled out. And you also talked about buy-in from execs, and super important, right? And thinking about, as we've heard about these journeys, right? Thinking about this not just as like a one-off, we're gonna stand up this tool and start using this tool, but actually, it's gonna require some investment of people time. It's gonna require kind of ongoing investment from the organization. And so people seeing the buy-in from execs can also really help, not just ensure that there's the resources to support this, but also to drum up that incentive, as you were talking about before, right? Make sure that people see that this is important to the organization. So maybe this will be, I'll try to combine two questions here to make it my last question, and then we'll feel free to keep incorporating others' questions into your answers, because this is great. I mean, it's really awesome to see all the interest in this and all the questions in the feed. So Heather talked a little bit about kind of ownership in that last answer, kind of giving ownership to the sectors. And I'd love to hear, from each of you, if you have any tips for driving a sense of system ownership. I think one thing that can often hold M&E teams back is, keeping the reins a little too tight, and that M&E as a function, or M&E systems, kind of sit in this silo. And I think what we've seen over the last 12 years of Vera is when we can just sort of define the process, like set the parameters, but then kind of let go a little bit and trust people while also giving them a sense of ownership, we can really do amazing things. But would love to hear if you guys have any insights, tips on driving system ownership, or other kind of big challenges that you've run into. This isn't all smooth sailing, so other kind of challenges that have come up along the journey. Emma, do you want to start this one?
Sure. Yeah, I think key for us, or one of the key things for us in terms of ownership, is that it is kind of the project end to end, right? In terms of the M&E. So there's no kind of global requirement for a particular reporting frequency. It mirrors what is happening kind of offline within the project design and implementation. So it can be more easily integrated into the project's ways of working. So the periodicity with which they were collecting data and reporting it in general. So we really wanted to keep that ownership at the level of the project team. So when we think about things like reviewing and approval of data, that also very much sits with the project and the country teams. That doesn't sit at a global level. So that's one thing. I think the other key thing for ownership from our point of view, and it comes back to this piece around visibility, is getting the use of the system integrated into other kind of regular processes that happen within plan. So we have a quarterly review and reflection process in offices, with projects within regions, and kind of integrating use of the system, review of the data into those discussions, into those reflections, I think is really important. So we're starting to see some really good traction on that in terms of reviewing kind of what is the actual evidence as it relates to results, where are we seeing progress, where are the gaps and why, and increasing that interrogation of the data. I think that is a journey, it's a work in progress, but it's something that we're working on at the moment. And obviously the idea is that there's a positive feedback loop there. It goes back to this in the kind of value that people see. The more our colleagues see the data being used and appreciated and kind of looked at, I think we hope and are seeing that increases and continues to increase the use of the system. I don't want to end on a challenge, but I guess in relation to lessons learned for the future or for other organizations, I would say, going back to what we were talking around support and resources, I guess for us, one of a key recommendation or a learning is that this can't always be absorbed as kind of business as usual for an organization. When you're rolling out a system across multiple different offices, across regions, across contexts, that does need resources, it does need time. It can sometimes require kind of particular system specialist expertise, which isn't necessarily something that sits within organizations like Plan or CRS or PAP. So yeah, that would be a recommendation for anyone thinking about doing this going forward. And as Plan, we're always happy to chat more about this bilaterally, one-on-one with our peer organizations as well.
That's great. Yeah. And I mean, part of the reason we're excited to have this chat is, you know, I think we've seen, and even back in my M&E days, like I learned the most by just talking with other M&E teams and hearing what they were going through, seeing their systems, you know, and then kind of incorporating some of those lessons into our work. Heather, do you want to pick us up? Tips for ownership or challenges or both?
Let's see. One of our challenges that might be unique to CRS is because we only do it on an annual basis. That means that sometimes teams forget like how they're supposed to do it. So we have to be careful that we do the reminders and the campaigns and the webinars early before the reporting period to remind people of their roles. I feel like I answered this question in my last response, so I don't want to repeat myself. And Alvaro put in the chat, he's my colleague, and he added some information about how we've been able to use operational reports that he developed to be able to give progress over time that helps those reviewers identify, okay, who's reported, who's missing, how to follow up, and just helps us to better target, where we need to spend our energy to make sure that everybody is reporting. I'll stop.
Yeah, that's good. We built a new feature in the latest release for having like not applicable results. I don't know if you guys are probably not using it yet, but you can kind of tag a result as like not applicable, and that opens the door, I think, for even better operational reporting, right? Like if we're expecting a certain number of results to be reported on, you want to pull the not applicable ones out, right? To be able to then get a good percentage of, cool, this report is like 90% done, or this report is like 30% done, or 0%. But great insights, Heather. Thanks. And Julie, we'll move to you.
I'm just looking at all the great questions in the chat. And so my mind is kind of in different places, but I don't know that I have more to add around ownership that hasn't been said already. I would emphasize that having this system be part of one of Path's core business systems, we use Salesforce and other ways too, has really made the data more visible and more searchable. And that's a huge gain. So there is a knowledge management component to this that we see, and that we have had, people comment on, oh, I searched for this and I got, all these results entities that I didn't know existed. So we're trying to capture those instances to be able to share with others, like, hey, these are other ways you can use the system. It's not all about aggregating information. Like, you can search and get connection, make connections between your work and other work that's happening in the organization that's relevant. So that's been a huge asset in terms of driving ownership of the information.
That's great. And I'll underline Emma's comment from before around, I think Julie touched on it as well, but just the not thinking about this just as business as usual, or like, we'll just, we'll just do this at the margins of the little bit of time that people might be able to make available. It really does require, a good plan and some dedicated resources to get any, and that goes not just for M&E systems, right, but for really any kind of technology rollout, right? It's a change, it's an organizational change project, and definitely requires some resources on that front. Cool. So we've got 10 minutes left or 12 minutes left. Let's see what we can knock out as far as questions. We got some really good insights insights and questions in the chat, and also appreciate that some folks have been helping to kind of answer and share insights along the way too. I'll help answer some like easy low-hanging fruit ones, and then we can bring some bigger questions into the group. So TN's question, is there any example of using AMP Impact for indicators, results frameworks integrated with grant management and grant lifecycle management? And yeah, actually we have a bunch of examples. So we're closing in about 90 organizations around the globe using AMP, collectively managing almost $9 billion of programs and projects and grants on AMP. So there's examples of organizations using AMP for outbound grant management and using indicator reporting and frameworks as part of that. Some examples are like the Elton John AIDS Foundation and the USAID Development Innovation Ventures, both kind of doing grant management, making grants and getting reports back through the system through portals. Then there's also good examples of inbound grant management. So organizations, managing their pipeline of grants coming in, and then setting up the frameworks that they're gonna and indicators that they're gonna report on to funders, and then kind of bringing data in. So Aga Khan Foundation comes to mind as a really good example of that. But we've got loads of examples of organizations doing that. So definitely, and we're happy to chat more about that. There's another question here around like, can we see a demo, which we didn't think we'd have time to do like a full demo within this session, but my team and I would love to do a demo. But also, I would encourage you to reach out to other speakers and other organizations that are using AMP to take a look at how they're using it. But we would certainly be happy to kind of do a demo and explore kind of what AMP would look like in your context, and can also show you some of the features beyond impact measurement as well, if you want to explore those. There's a question around cost. I think there's the quick answer there is there's a big range. It depends kind of where an organization is coming from, and what all is going to be rolled out, what kind of capacity exists in the organization already to drive some of the implementation. You want to be thinking not just about the license cost for AMP and Salesforce. AMP licenses are based on the size of the portfolio being managed with the tool. Salesforce licenses are based on users. But you also want to think about that setup cost, and then kind of ongoing costs, and the resources, the personnel as well, as Emma touched on. Cool. All right. So I touched on a couple low-hanging fruit questions there. We had some really interesting questions, I think, around kind of local versus global indicators, and like any learnings around driving adoption of global indicators. I think there's a question from Tier Fund and maybe from World Vision as well around that. Anyone want to share an experience or insight?
I can. I was just typing a response to that, to one of those questions. So, yeah, it's a great question. The approach we've taken at Path, and this is based on our annual survey that we did in the past and other efforts we've done to measure our impact that have not been in AMP Impact. We felt like it was really important to, before we establish standardized indicators, really get projects, used to reporting indicators into the system and using that to view what they're doing. So that's the bottom-up approach, is like looking at what are our projects currently measuring. We found what we asked them to enter was not everything that they were measuring. We asked them to enter the indicators that they were using to measure health impact, or indicators they were using to monitor disparities in how they were delivering their work. And if they weren't collecting indicators about either of those things, then they did not need to enter any indicators. So what we found is that about 30% of our projects entered information about, that were measuring information about health impact or those disparities. So, and that was 30% of the number of our projects. It was closer to 50% of the dollar valuation of our projects, which indicates that it's those larger projects that are doing that kind of measurement. And so then we looked at what types of indicators they were measuring, and we used that as one input into the indicator development process. I mentioned that menu of indicators that we're going to be rolling out this year. And so when we thought about the menu of more standardized indicators, we were doing kind of a top-down exercise, looking at what are the most important SDGs to which Path's work is contributing, what are donors asking for, and then, you know, kind of marrying that with what our projects are currently measuring, and coming up with this menu, which I said is about 12 to 14 indicators. And that's going to be a test. You know, we're going to see what the uptake is going to look like, and we're actually prioritizing a subset of those indicators within the 12 to 14 because it is a lot. And so we're going to need to be able to focus our support in certain a certain subset of indicators to start with, so that we're not, you know, I think our strategy is, let's get, rather than get sort of a smattering of data quality, let's really focus first on a set and try and get good data quality for those. And so that's going to be more of the health outcomes, the health impact indicators. And then we'll make that menu available and again, see what is the uptake like, how are people interpreting those, how are they designing their measurement systems to capture that information, and learn from that approach, and then help evolve the guidance and get more standardized on those. So it really, back to Emma's first comment, this is a journey. It is not, it's not something you can implement and snap your fingers as you did, Zach, so quickly. And I think those on the call, the questions that are being asked recognize this, that, you know, this is, it's a huge endeavor to get an organization all kind of rowing their oars in the same way. So it's definitely a change management exercise. So anyway, that's how we've approached both the indicator design with an eye towards getting strong uptake.
Great insight, Julie. I'll see if Heather or Emma have something to add, and I'll throw out just two other questions from the chat that are kind of somewhat related. One was around kind of localization of global indicators, which is something you can do with AMP. But curious if somebody was curious if that's something that you're doing, kind of allowing projects to say, hey, I'm using this global indicator, but I'm adjusting it, or I'm like localizing it a little bit. And then there was a question from Enrico at CGIAR around kind of showing the value and how has the system kind of helped show that we're using data for decision making? Have you seen that some of the information being collected isn't useful, and then kind of learn from that? That'll probably be the last question because I'm mindful of time.
I did respond to the partnership question, just how CRS does it. We it's in the chat, but just to say that we work with our partners wherever they have helped us, you know, contribute to our indicators. You know, we ask the project manager to, it's that person's responsibility to make sure that that data is incorporated. So definitely we do that. Sorry, what was the second question?
Yeah. And to build on that, you can set up portals on Salesforce as well for partners. And again, that's something we're happy to demonstrate for folks how that's how that can be done and also how it is being done by others. Yeah, I don't know, Emma, localization or any of those topics that you want to hit on?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely didn't want the global indicators to be a straight jacket or to be too restrictive for different offices and projects, because there's always things that need to be tailored. So what is in our system and all of the guidance is matched by kind of offline guidance, which includes this is our recommendations on how you could adapt it or specify or localize it to a particular project or office. But these are the areas that we'd really recommend that you kept as part of the core standard measurement of the indicator. And we now have that functionality within our system for offices to be able to tell us if they've made significant adaptations through a kind of tick box, so that we can take that into account if there's any kind of analysis happening or aggregation. So that's the approach that we've taken as plan, again, to avoid it being kind of heavily restricted, but still maintaining that focus on quality, consistency, and yeah.
Awesome. I'll pull up a final slide just as a thanks. I'm mindful of time and don't want to make people run late for their next meeting, but I'll also just open the floor if there's any kind of final burning insights, Julie, Heather, Emma, that you want to share before we wrap up today.
I would just say that as much as this is a journey and it's challenging, it's a huge value add for our organization. We are not going back to how we did it before. It's the way we're going to do it going forward. And I think that will definitely show itself in the increasing use of the data.
Awesome. Thanks, Julie.
Sorry, I lost everybody, so I got a little disoriented.
I'm usually picking up right from you. So Heather, Emma, any final words?
No, I really love what Julie said. It's so true for CRS too. Like the whole new world is opening up to us. The way that we're seeing now how we can really, like I mentioned earlier, just how we can benefit from this is build in more platforms and make it easier for our teams to be able to submit and analyze complex indicators. So yeah, thanks for this opportunity, Zach.
Oh, awesome. No, thank you. Emma, you get the last word.
No, I think both of the colleagues have said it well, but to re-emphasize what I said earlier, we're always happy to chat, share experiences, and also hear from others. So please feel free to reach out.
Fantastic. A big thanks to Heather, Julie, and Emma for sharing your insights today. A big thanks to everybody for joining and asking great questions. And of course to NetHope for organizing. If you want to get in touch with Vera, you can scan the QR code or drop me a note at zach@verasolutions.org. Seth, do you want to take us home?
Thank you so much, Zach. Special thanks to our speakers again today, and thanks to this excellent and engaged audience. I just want to give a special shout out to Vera Solutions for consistently championing our NetHope community over the years. You are a valued NetHope partner, and we appreciate you back. I just want to remind everyone that this webinar series needs your voice, and you can help us improve this vital resource for the NetHope community by filling out our webinar survey. Links are going up in the chat, and they will also be in our follow-up email and on the webinar landing page at nethope.org, where we will have the recording and all of the resources shared from today's webinar. And on behalf of our presenters and NetHope, we wish you a great rest of your day wherever you are in our wide world. And thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for all the great questions, and thanks for having us.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.